Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. Thanks for joining us again this week. Great show today. Hall of Fame jockey Chris McCarron will be on shortly. And later on from NBC Sports, my friend and colleague Ahmed will join us as well. All right, in the studio is Ben Chaffins on lead guitar. Hello, Ben.
Hello, Kenny.
You know, one day maybe we can all get together again because we've all been separated with everything going on. At his home is our ace researcher, Mr. Thomas Kenny. Hello, Thomas.
How you guys doing today?
Good. Hopefully, we can all catch up someday. We are catching up now, of course, to talk about, I believe this week we're going to talk about some of the great jockeys, the winners of all time. And the guy we're going to have on in just a few minutes, Chris McCarron, is right there among them, Thomas.
Yeah, that's right. According to the data I'm looking at right now, Chris McCarron is 6th on the list of all-time winners. In his almost 30, he's started 34,240 races, and of those races, he's won 7,141 of them. That also puts him 8th on the list of all-time earners for jockeys at $263,986,005.
The $5. and you know,
005 on the end of that.
Yeah, and, you know, at one time I remember when I think Chris was number one when he retired, but it's kind of like everything else. It's like, you know, sports salaries today. It's all got to be kind of judged by just how crazy the money is now. You know, some of the great players in the 80s, for example, not even making the money, be it a basketball player, football player, baseball player, are making the money that they are now.
Right.
So, you know, there weren't that many $8 million races at that time. And we've been pretty lucky. We had Lafitte Pinkai Jr. on, who's number 2 all time, Gary Stevens, who's among the best. And then, you know, now we're going to have Chris on today. I love talking to guys like this. Don't you guys like to hear from them? You know, because they are special. You know, we know guys that have had careers that have done well, but, you know, the guys like this, they just do stuff in a way that other people can't. And I guess it's just, Thomas, you're the car racing fan. You know, I guess some guys just have one little knack out there that somebody else doesn't have, and it makes them the best or one of the best.
Yeah, it's often the little things that separate the best of the best from the almost best of the best. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think, you know, and Chris was one of them. Like I said, Gary, look, everybody that's in that top 10 of wins, Russell Bays, I believe, is still on top in that wins. And
yes.
Then Pinkai is right. Pinkai is right behind him. Sandy Hawley, I believe, is up there or close to it. I think. I got it. Bill Shoemaker's up there. You know, guys like that. You know, they all had that. They were different, yet they all had that same quality. Does that make sense? You know, kind of like a great baseball player today. They may be a little different in some ways, but they had that same quality. Maybe they hit more for power. Maybe they hit more for average. But they do the things that make them special.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's solid fundamentals that pretty much go across boundaries. You know what I mean?
And when we come back, I certainly do. Chris McCarron is the man that will talk more about that, the Hall of Fame jockey waiting on deck here on the Horse Racing Show. You're listening to the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. We appreciate your time this week, and I am thrilled to have this man on. He is a friend. We've actually worked together, and who among us did not enjoy seeing him in action? One of the all-time great jockeys, 7,141 victories. He is Chris McCarron. Chris, good to catch up.
Hey, thanks, Kenny. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, thanks. You know, there's so much to talk about, and basically I think a lot of your fans would like to know, how's life going for you these days?
Wonderful. Couldn't be better. I'm enjoying it. We've had some nice weather here in Lexington, Kentucky, which translates for me to a lot of golf. Playing a lot of golf these days.
How's the handicap?
Oh, it's going up, unfortunately.
Chris began his career. He was a kid. His older brother, Greg, who I also worked with, you know, at NBC.
That's right. Sure did.
I worked with many of the McCarrons. Great people.
Uh-huh.
And I think Greg kind of got you into it around 16. You turned pro at 18. Immediately you go out and you win 547 races and set a record right off for an apprentice. How did all that come? Was it just a natural thing you were going to be a jockey?
Well, I didn't know when I was growing up what I was going to be. I wanted to be a hockey player, but I was neither good enough nor big enough or fast enough. But my brother Greg, as you mentioned, started riding in 1969 when I was a freshman in high school, and I would get out of school at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then jump on the train and go two train stops to Suffolk Downs, and I'd climb the fence. I had to sneak in because back then you had to be at least 18 years of age to get in, and I was only 14. And so I would watch him ride the last few races at Suffolk, and I got hooked on it.
And was it, when you start out and you just start off with such a bang and you got all this attention and people are talking about this young McCarron guy all over the country, was that, if you made it look easy, in other words, you made it look like this was just a natural thing for you. Did it feel that way when you first started riding and you start winning and things looked like it was going to be a great future, which obviously it turned out to be?
It did feel natural, Kenny, yeah. And it did come relatively easily to me. I guess I was born to be a race rider, and I was lucky enough to have an older brother. Greg is 7 years old, my elder, and if he didn't go on to be a jockey, I don't know what I would have done. But since he introduced me to it, and I took to it like a fish to water, so I was lucky enough to be able to start riding just 2 years after I got a job on the racetrack. So it all worked out well. But I had a very good mentor. Greg's mentor was also my mentor, a guy named Odie Cleland, who happened to be a Kentuckian, and he taught me the ropes, and I learned on the job, while on the job training was going on. So it was a lot of fun back in 1974, and I look back on it with very fond memories.
And, you went on to help. You had a riding school and you taught young jockeys. And is it as simple as saying, here's a couple of things or 2 or 3 things that you have to be able to do to have success as a rider? You may not become Chris McCarron. Few are going to ever get close to that. But you can have a career if you can do these things.
It's more than a couple of things. There are a lot of things that, first of all, you have to be born with balance. You have to have good balance on a horse's back. And if you don't have balance, or what I learned from teaching the kids when I started the North American Racing Academy back in 2006, what I learned was balance is an attribute that cannot be taught. It can be improved upon. It's like a singing voice. You can either sing, carry a tune, or you cannot. It doesn't matter how much practice you put in with singing. You can improve a voice, but you don't necessarily get to the point where you're going to make any money doing it. But and balance, I believe, is a physical attribute that falls in the same category. Now, as I said, you can improve it by getting stronger and doing balance exercises and so forth. But that's the number one thing. You got to have balance, and the other thing is you have to have a God-given talent to communicate with horses. That's something that you're born with, and it's also something that again can be improved upon with lessons and teaching and so forth.
Talking with Hall of Fame jockey Chris McCarron, of course, 9 Breeders' Cup wins, 5 classics, including back-to-back in 88 and 89 with Ali Sheba and Sunday Silence, 0 and 01 with Tiz Now. And then, of course, obviously spectacular races, spectacular horses. And then I think at 96, I remember being up there at Woodbine when Alphabet Soup wins, and that was your first classic victory. And that got a lot of attention, of course, because of who you beat that day.
Well, you don't mind being corrected, do you?
No, please do.
That was actually my third one.
That was your third one. You know what? Yes.
Yeah.
If I could do math, I would have figured out. I just said Ali Sheba, Sunday Silence, and Tiz Now. Duh. And so yeah, put it in there after Sunday Silence. Your third one at Woodbine.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chris.
That's correct. Yep. And that was a lot of fun because Cigar, everyone knew it was going to be Cigar's last race in his career, and he was coming off of a defeat at Del Mar when a horse called Dare and Go beat him. He was going for Citation's record. He equaled the record, but he was going to break Citation's record of 16 straight stakes victories.
16 in a row, yeah.
Yeah, and so it was a lot of fun to beat him, and also we beat the Preakness winner that year, a horse named Louis Quatorze, and it was a very, very tight finish. There were noses apart when we hit the finish line, but for some reason I knew I won that one. It was close, but I knew I got there.
You know, we could go on and start talking about all the horses. I think Ali Sheba especially. I'm still trying to figure out how Ali Sheba didn't face plant and still went on to win. You know, that's still one of the most remarkable recovery jobs I've ever seen with you in the saddle.
Well, thanks, Kenny. He was a terrific athlete. He was very agile on his feet, and when he stumbled there at the head of the stretch, I didn't have time to think of what the consequences could be. All I thought was, don't fall now. We only have one horse left to get by, you know. And so he was able to right himself and get back up and go on and get the money.
Ali Sheba, the 87 Derby winner. Of course, as I mentioned, went on to win the Breeders' Cup the next year. Go for Jen, your second one in 94. Interesting day. That muddy track comes up, and that seems like the perfect scenario for him.
He did love the mud that day. That was he loved that racetrack. When Nick offered me the mount, he asked me if I would fly back to Louisville to breeze him a week before the Derby, which I did. I took the red eye out of Los Angeles and got into Cincinnati at 6 o'clock in the morning, and then drove from Cincinnati to Churchill Downs, and we breezed him right after the renovation break. And he gave me goosebumps, Kenny, the way he got across the racetrack. I asked him to run a little bit just to test him out, and man, did he give me the right answer. And boy, he really relished that going at Churchill Downs, especially when it came up muddy.
How important is it to maybe have a shot at riding a horse, like you said in that case with Go for Jen, before you actually get into such a key race?
It depends on the horse. If the horse has some quirks, some idiosyncrasies that would make it beneficial to get to know the horse, then it's important to get on their back at least one time, maybe not once, but even more than that. But if they're very straightforward, like he was a free-running horse, not difficult to ride at all, then it's not crucial. But Nick felt it was important for me to get to know him, and I think he knew the horse was doing so well that he really wanted me to get to know him and have my confidence boosted, which I did, and that it turned out to be a real blessing.
We've talked about some of the horses you've ridden, and add to that John Henry and Lady Secret and Touch Gold. I don't know if I don't think you could say, hey, this is my favorite. Maybe you could say it's my favorite. I mean, you've really been on, you're a Hall of Famer, and you've been on some Hall of Fame horses.
Yes, I have. Sunday Silence was another one, and I only got to ride him that one time in the Classic down at Gulfstream, but because I got hurt the following year when he was making his debut as a 4-year-old. But you can't leave Precisionist out of the mix either, because
yes.
Yeah, that horse, he could run 5/8 and 55 and change, Kenny, and he won 2 grade ones going a mile and a quarter. He was a very versatile horse. He won on the grass at Hollywood Park, and he was just an outstanding racehorse.
And that's the thing that I love talking to you about this, because we could go back and go, yeah, that horse, yeah, that horse, yeah, that horse.
Yeah,
and I'm sure that probably during some of the golf breaks out there between the 7 and 8 hole, somebody's asking you about some horse you've ridden, because there have been so many in your career.
That's right. That does happen.
I know it had to.
Sure.
It's almost like the Chris Farley thing from the old Saturday Night Live. Hey, remember when you won the Preakness twice? Remember when you won the Belmont twice? I guess, people just are just excited to hear about one of the horses in one of the races, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Kenny. I appreciate that.
And you make a bold move. I mean, you're still you're a young man. You've done well in the East. As we talked about, you turned pro at 18. You're the best apprentice rider out there. And not long after that, you start making that move out to the West Coast, and you step in. It's the all-star game. I mean, there's Pinkai's there, Shoemaker's there, young up-and-comer Stevens is there. Hawley. I'm going to leave, see, Delahousie. I'm going to leave somebody out. But, it's like, I imagine, you walk into, you're a basketball fan. You walk in there and you look around and there's, pretty much every great basketball player, almost every great jockey was at the West Coast when you went there.
That's right. It's easy to look back now and say what a great colony it was. But at the time, there were 7 jockeys that I was riding against, not including myself. 7 other individuals that went on to be in the Hall of Fame. And there's one name that you left out, Darryl McCarron. He's going to be inducted this year into the Hall of Fame, and he was as good as any of them. But he didn't ride as long as everybody else. He only rode for about 14 years, and he's one that's kind of forgotten. But he's being well remembered this year with the induction going to happen in August. I know there's not going to be a ceremony, but that's typically when it is in August up at Saratoga. So I'm very happy, very proud of Darryl for being able to accomplish that.
See, and once again, you throw another name at me. I said, like riding all the great jockeys you rode against, all the great horses. I can always find someone. You can always mention someone and go, yes, that's why we have a legend like Chris McCarron on this show.
Oh, thanks, Kenny.
We're going to take a quick break and be right back with the Hall of Famer right after this. This is the Horse Racing Show. And welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. Kenny Rice here. Thrilled to have a good friend and as good a jockey as you'll ever find in Chris McCarron. We've been talking about some of the horses, some of the people he's ridden against, and just an amazing career. Was there a time, Chris, when you knew that this was going to be more than just a really good job? That, you'd obviously started out red hot as an apprentice. You go to L.A., you go to the colony in Southern California. Was there a time there where you said, I can hold my own with any of these guys, no matter how good they are?
Well, I knew when I arrived out there that I had God-given talent to get run out of horses. But it was only a matter of time before I realized that I could hold my own with some of the best in the country. And I had a feeling that I could, which is why I decided to move out there. And I just needed the opportunity. I just needed to work hard and get out there, get out to the track every morning and breeze a lot of horses for trainers. And hopefully they would throw me a bone. And after a period of time, the winners started coming. And I remember I finished 4th in the standings at my first full meet at Hollywood Park. I finished 4th in the standings behind Lafitte, Shoe, and Sandy Hawley. So that was a pretty good feeling. I won 65 races in 75 days, which was huge for me. So I got off on the right foot, that's for sure.
And as things progressed, and you're getting the big mounts, and I guess some of the young guys that are coming up are starting to ask you, hey, Chris, you got a tip there? Or did you guys talk much about that in the jockeys' quarters? Because I don't know of any other athletes that go into the same dressing room and now you're going to compete against each other. The Celtics and Lakers could have never shared a dressing room.
No, nor could the Detroit Pistons with any team.
That's true.
You got the bad boys of Detroit. You're right. It's a very unique atmosphere in the jocks room. You have to be cordial. It don't have to be, but it's nice to be cordial and friendly with your competitors. But as soon as that bell rings, man, it's every man for himself, and you just you have to learn how to live with these people, but the personalities involved were so nice and they were so full of class that it was not an easy. I mean, it was not a difficult adjustment for me whatsoever. It was really, really good one.
I know you know hockey. You love hockey. You love your Boston Bruins, I imagine, to this day.
Yes, sir.
They didn't convert you to the Kings while you were out there.
No. Well, you know what? I did become a Kings fan. I was a season ticket holder. I had 4 seats to the Kings at the Forum, and but like a knucklehead, I sold my seats to the guy who's sitting behind me, the same year that they got Gretzky, when Bruce McNall went up to Edmonton and he bought Gretzky out from underneath the Oilers. Well, I had just previous to that sold my tickets, and I was kicking myself in the tail for that.
You'll appreciate this, I think. I was calling a fight for NBC, working with Sugar Ray Leonard, and we're in Lowell, Massachusetts, and Mickey Ward is in the audience. People probably saw the movie The Fighter with Mark Wahlberg, and, people are coming up to him. Well, the fights start. We had a couple of the early fights on the undercard, and then suddenly there's this huge ovation, and I'm thinking, what is going on? Because there's only, it's the third fight of the night, and, it's a pretty good fight, but what's the excitement? And Bobby Orr had walked in.
Ah, yeah. I got a wonderful phone call about a month and a half ago. Jerry Cheevers called me. He's a Hall of Fame goalie for the Bruins, and he called to tell me they were doing a special on the NHL Network. They were featuring Jerry Cheevers, Phil Esposito, Derek Sanderson, and Bobby Orr. And it was an hour-long program, and it was absolutely wonderful. It took me back down memory lane with some of the fondest memories I have of Boston sports, not just the Bruins, but of Boston sports altogether. And I grew up there. I left there when I was 17 years of age, but I've been a lifelong Red Sox, Bruins, Celtics, and Patriots fan for my whole life. Yep.
And, working like with Eddie Olczyk, who I know you know well.
Sure.
Guys like him and other hockey players I've met through him, and some guys in the basketball world like Dan Issel, Rex Chapman that I've gotten to know over the years, they look at you guys and they're amazed at the pound-for-pound excellence of an athletic ability that a jockey has to have. So, just as you might look at some of them, they're looking right back at you saying, wow, look at Chris McCarron, or look at whatever the great jockey is. The balance and the strength and the timing and everything that everybody needs to be one of the best in athletes.
Well, thanks for saying that, Kenny. You're right. We're kind of overlooked a little bit when people start talking who are the best overall athletes. I think jockeys fit right up there in the top three. I think maybe soccer players may be the fittest, but jockeys are right there as well. We got to be very, very fit in order to achieve that balance that we were talking about earlier. You got to be real strong, real fit, and you have to endure a tremendous amount of physical activity. So it's a great way to make a living, though, Kenny. It's really a lot of fun. I know it's dangerous and everything, but it's really a lot of fun.
Chris, I want to throw this idea at you, and I've talked to some of the people over the years. Casual conversations, be it on a plane or passing through with some NTRA guys, some Breeders' Cup guys. And to me, yes, I know the horse is going to be the star, but I always thought the boat was missed, and still is, on focusing on the jockeys. And maybe even, especially in this day of MMA and these extreme sports that catch on, it doesn't hurt to remind just how dangerous it is, and the high speeds and the close contact you're having. And, oh, by the way, there's about an 1,100-pound athlete under you that's maybe wanting to go one way and you're trying to get him to go the other. I'd like to see a little more emphasis personally on that I think's been missing, to really keep focusing on how important it is, the jockey in a horse race.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I broke 12 separate bones during my career, during 28 years. So that's it's almost one every other year. I rode for 28, and so there. When the Jockeys Guild started keeping records, taking track of the injuries to jockeys, they started back in the 40s, and ever since then, every year 2 jockeys are killed and 2 more are paralyzed, and that's just a cold hard fact. So that in itself demonstrates how dangerous a job it really is.
One of the better movies about horse racing is Seabiscuit, and the technical advisor on that, Hall of Famer Chris McCarron. What did they come up with? Did they just ask you anything that was just totally crazy right off? And you can give them that. They're making a movie. They're not necessarily into the horse racing game that much. But when they came to you, what was kind of the questions they were asking?
Well, I was the race designer, technical advisor, as you said, on the film. One thing they were adamant about, and that was making it look as realistic as possible. So my job was to point out something that we wouldn't do. They might want to put it in the film, and I would tell the director, Gary Ross, and say, no, we just don't do it that way. We just don't, like in the film Secretariat, you saw the jockey who played Ron Turcotte walk into the barn with all his riding outfit on, his afternoon riding outfit on, and a saddle under his arm. You just don't see that.
Yeah.
But one thing they wanted to do, and I put my foot down and wouldn't allow them to, was they wanted the jockeys to go out there and ride with just the scally caps on, the English racing cap.
Yeah.
They didn't want them to wear helmets because they didn't have helmets back in the 30s. But I put my foot down and I said, no, it's way too dangerous for them to go out there and ride these horses at 40 miles an hour without a helmet. So they gave me my way, I should say.
As they should, by the way.
Sure. Yeah.
I remember people have asked me, the scene where Gary Stevens is talking during the race, and I actually put it in one of those coffee commercials. I don't know if you ever saw it, where they were showing those little blurbs. But people said, do jockeys talk a lot to each other during the course of a race? Do they really look over and say, see you later, good luck, or whatever? I said, oh, no. I think, if you have told me some things said, maybe you can't repeat it, but I guess there's some communications out there.
You're right. There is. It's minimal, but you don't say so long, Charlie, or you don't say, hey, are you going to Madam's the Madam's house tonight? Or we don't do that. But whenever there's some danger involved, there's definitely some communication for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and can it also be the point of, hey, open up, give me a break or something? I mean, is that kind of communication? Is that fair to say if you think somebody's drifting out on you or closing in on you?
Well, you don't say open up, let me in, or move over, let me through. Yeah. You just kind of like, hey, I'm in here, something like that. But it doesn't. You can't expect someone to move over when you yell to them and say, hey, let me through. If you do that, they might shut you off intentionally instead of letting you through. But that's where the camaraderie in the jocks room and you can't go out there and ride with any animosity. It's just too dangerous. Yeah.
Well, Chris, it's been great catching up. 21% winners in his career. This is tantamount to you're almost like Ted Williams. We'll go back to Boston, okay? It's like a 400 hitter in baseball for a jockey to win 21% of the time. Only a handful of guys have ever done it throughout their career, and Chris is one of them.
Well, thank you, Kenny. I appreciate it. This has been fun. I'd like to do it again sometime in the future.
We'll definitely do that, and we'll catch up for lunch soon, and we'll talk basketball, another one of our favorite sports.
There you go. Sounds great, Kenny.
All right. Thank you. The great Chris McCarron, the Hall of Fame jockey, 7,141 wins. Stay with us. You're listening to The Horse Racing Show. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. Thank you for tuning in. Really glad to have this man with us. He is a colleague and a friend at NBC, Ahmed Fareed, who has been a guest before. He's back again. And here's how talented this guy is and versatile. We're catching him between Premier League soccer matches right now, and he's taking time to call. So we'll talk about a furlong. Oh, wait, there's a kick. I don't know how you keep up with it sometimes.
I don't sometimes, Kenny. That's the problem. I do cross over. And it was funny because someone was describing a conversation they had with a Major League Baseball player. And they said to him, they go, you're the utility guy. You really are useful because you can do a little bit of everything. And the Major League Baseball player did not like that. He did not like being referred to as a utility guy. And I heard that story. I was like, oh, my gosh, I love being called a utility guy. That's my thing. It's like the guy that can do a little bit, knows very little about a lot of things. I was like, that's what I can hold. So I don't know why that Major League Baseball player didn't like that. I take it as a source of pride.
Well, you know what? I would kind of go the same way, doing some boxing and MMA and basketball for him over the years. And it's kept us employed, hasn't it? That's the best thing.
Yeah, I mean, that really is it. You take a look at how you think that your career is going to go when you first start getting into sports broadcasting. You're like, all right, what's my favorite sport? I love baseball. All right, I'll be a baseball reporter. Or you could say the same thing about football. But you're right. Once you get into it, you see like, okay, there may be 3 or 4 people in my region that just focus solely on baseball, and if I'm not going to get one of those jobs, maybe I should branch out a little bit. And it's more. I don't know if it's the case for you, but it's just more rewarding because you end up learning about things and meeting people that you would have never met or come across in your life, and it just ends up feeling a lot better, even though you're kind of jumping into the deep end without your swimmies sometimes.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think you brought that to horse racing. It's about 3 years now we've been doing this together. And, you come in. And I think sometimes it's good with any sport to have a little fresh eyes on it and have maybe some questions that we take for granted, be it whatever sports you kind of cover regularly. I don't know if you see it that way or not.
Well, yeah, 100%. Because I think I got into it, and we work with Rob Hyland, who does a Football Night in America, as well as all the Triple Crown races. And that was one of the first things he said to me. He said, how familiar are you with horse racing? And I told him not really that familiar at all. And he goes, perfect. And I go, I don't know that that's perfect, Rob. I feel like that's you might have a different definition of perfect than me. But he was coming at it the same way you are. It's like, come at it with fresh eyes, come at it with curiosity and a desire to learn from people who have covered it for a long time, learn from people who have been in the sport for a long time. And so basically now for a year and a half, working with you, Kenny, and Randy Moss and Jerry Bailey, I've done that. And I feel like I've gotten to a point now, it's like, okay, I've got the foundation. I know what everyone's trying to do. Now, what are some things that maybe people who've been in it for 10, 20 years have taken for granted that we could do a little twist on it and maybe advance it in these certain ways? And I think you're right. That's what the fresh eyes, hopefully, I can bring to that and continue to bring to it.
You picked it up so quickly. And, to me, just like when I first started doing like MMA like a dozen years ago, I knew they stood up, they get on the ground. You can kind of see that. And I know one of the people that had covered it and kind of thought, well, okay, I mean, I said, yeah, I understand. But to me, if you can't understand a sport after watching it maybe for a day, it's probably not a sport you care about. I mean, some things are fairly self-explanatory. You learn the nuances as you go, but I think you can kind of get the basics down, guys like us that cover a lot of sports.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that for horse racing, it's all about having skin in the game. And I really do believe that, fantasy baseball, fantasy football really helped those sports tremendously. And those were sports that were ingrained in American society, and they still needed a little boost. And I think they got it from those different fantasy sports. And so I think that's what horse racing gives you too, is you have literally skin in the game with betting on the horses. And what's been intriguing to me, Kenny, is looking at the structure of some of the ownerships of these horses, and I know it's been happening for a while, but it seems to be trending in an upward direction now with the syndicate program. So you not only have horses that you may bet on a Saturday afternoon and you're rooting for them for 2 minutes. You have these horses that you literally have ownership of throughout their entire career. And so I think that's kind of interesting to me, and to see where that goes with the sport of horse racing, because that's literally adding even more skin to the game for a lot of the people out there. And that's something you can easily understand and get behind. Like you mentioned, you get behind, hey, this is a horse. I own 0.5% of him, and I'm going to follow his career and root for him every time he's on the track.
Talking with Ahmed Fareed of NBC Sports, the very versatile Ahmed Fareed. And, our friend Rob Hyland just had a horse run over the weekend. You mentioned, people that we know, and I know a few other people, they got a little percentage of a horse. They get right in it. It's not like we can have a percentage of a sports franchise, Yeah. I mean, that does make a difference, I think.
Yeah. And I think, although you have seen, I think, what was it, Spencer Dinwiddie in the NBA? was thinking about structuring his contract in a way where people could buy stock. It was basically buying stock in Spencer Dinwiddie. There are a lot of really interesting ideas out there, and who knows? It seems like our whole world has come to a halt here in 2020. But I think what it has done is that it's accelerated trends that would have happened maybe a decade from now. You're going to start to see people do them a year from now and 2 years from now, because you're thinking, why wait? If this is the future, let's try to explore it. So I am kind of curious. There are these financial structures for sports, but I just wonder how sports in general will look 5 years from now, because I think it will be different than it would have looked if all this stuff hadn't happened.
How does it look sitting in the studio and seeing me or whoever is out there on location? And I imagine it's going to be this way for you at the Haskell again this week. You're going to be in Stamford, Connecticut, and the reporters are going to be in New Jersey. What's that like when you look out there and see no one's there but a reporter and a few trainers and some horses?
So at first, my first show I did, it was me and Randy Moss in the studio. And the strangest part was having someone next to me in studio, because we've gone for so many months with just Zoom calls and all the FaceTimes, and that's how we've done TV and digital. So in a weird way, when I saw Randy Moss in person for the first time, I was like, wow, this is different for 2020. But, we've adapted really, really quickly. The whole media landscape has adapted really quickly. Outside of a delay, the worst part is the delay, right? If you can't have that natural conversation, and that's the benefit of having everyone in the same room, is that there's just no delay. You can look someone in the eye. You know when someone's about to make a point. You let them make that point, and then you can transition to the break or whatever element is next. So that's the hardest part from a technical standpoint. But I think the good thing, Kenny, is that we're seeing that there's a time where we thought, okay, everything has to be perfect. It has to look perfect for us to put it on TV. But now we're like, no, hey, let's get someone on their cell phone reacting to their horse who just won a race. They're not by a TV studio. They're just in their home in Kentucky. Let's get them on the phone and talk to them, and that is good enough. It doesn't need to look perfect and sound perfect. We just want the presence there. And so if there's a good thing that's happened out of 2020, at least for television, is that we are a little more creative in trying to get the voices heard from people, even if they're not sitting in a television studio somewhere.
Talking with Ahmed Fareed of NBC Sports. A quick break, and we'll be right back on the Horse Racing Show. Do not go away. And welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. Ahmed Fareed, our special guest here from NBC Sports. We were just talking about how interesting it is with all the people having to adapt, as you are out there in all walks of life, but to be at events where no one is there or few people are let in. You want to make a prediction on it, on what might happen in the sports world this fall? I'm open for any suggestions to try to see if we can get some football back. I know basketball and baseball are getting ready to start in some capacity.
Yeah. Oh man, you're trying to make me make a prediction where I feel like every prediction that has been made in 2020 has been not only wrong but embarrassingly wrong. But I'll go down that road. I think it's going to be tough for football. Here's my hope. I think that there's going to be places throughout the country, because it's not one size fits all, as we've seen throughout this pandemic. And New York was a hot spot, and now you're seeing it in Arizona and Florida, is that there are going to be some venues across the country where they can figure out a way to not let in 50,000, 100,000 fans, but maybe 20,000 fans to have a little sense of normalcy at some of these sporting events. But it's sad. I'll be honest with you, Kenny. I haven't enjoyed that part of it, because I think we're hoping that, hey, maybe we can hear the players a little bit more. Maybe we can mic them up, and it's just going to be different in 2020. But boy, the fans and the shots and the emotion from a game is so much of obviously the in-person experience, but it's so much of the TV experience as well for a lot of these different sports. If you don't have the fans, and I think baseball, if you don't have the fans, and they were talking in baseball, not even playing in their own stadiums at first, they will attempt to do that now. But those are such a big part of why we like it. We like watching the reaction. It's like a laugh track on a comedy show. It feels empty without it. It's the same thing with fans. And so I think if there's one thing, Kenny, it's like how much I realize how much fans aren't just, people who pay tickets to go watch. They're a huge part of why we like sports. We love watching sports because we love seeing the reaction of the fans.
And, the fans have been starving. One of the best things that could happen to horse racing in some strange way, in what has been incredible, strange years we know, is that's been the sport that by and large has been able to go on when no one else was. Now a few are picking it up, but horse racing's still been able to go on. And Ahmed, as you know, people are betting. They got their phones. They can do it. They don't have to be there. They could turn on NBC this week and watch the Haskell and get their bets in. So, from that standpoint, I guess there's some satisfaction, especially for horse racing fans.
Yeah, we've seen that certainly when you don't have basketball to gamble on and baseball and hockey, that there's going to be a segment that looks for anything, whether it be horse racing or the stock market, which I feel like a lot of people have gotten into too. And I give horse racing a lot of credit because Randy Moss talks about this, is that you can't just take care of horses from home. I mean, there's always going to be an element of we have to be here. We have to be here for these horses to take care of them, to walk them, to work them out, to feed them. And so there was always going to be an element of people having to work and be around the barns. And so if you have that element and you're thinking, well, how much farther do we have to go to actually run these races, even if we have no fans? And so I give horse racing a lot of credit because they have been testing and there have not been very many positive tests. I think for jockeys, you can count them on one hand, maybe two or three. So they've been able to kind of give a blueprint for some people on how to operate as safely as possible in 2020. So I give them a ton of credit.
And the Haskell coming up this weekend, which is always a big race for 3-year-olds. Probably never more than right now, especially because it's a Derby road step this year in the back and forth of the Triple Crown and the Derby, the second race.
God, we got to become like mathematicians because usually it's pretty easy to figure out how many points you need to qualify for the Derby, but now it's just like I got out my abacus and calculator. I'm like, okay, they've won a race back in February. Is that going to matter anymore? I know, and I think who knows. Talking before about how we changed the sport and what kind of innovations are there. I think by and large, everyone sees this as a abnormal 2020, and I don't know if there's a whole bunch that could change with the way we run the Triple Crowns. I think everyone's pretty happy with having the Kentucky Derby kick it off. Then you have the Preakness. Then you have the Belmont. I do wonder if they will look at the spacing and how spaced out they are. If 2 weeks between races is still prudent, if we want to stretch it out to a month like we'll have between the last two of these Triple Crown races. So it's going to be totally different. And people say this too, Kenny, with baseball. They're like, will that be a real World Series champion if you only play 60 games and it's just such a weird season, no fans? And no, it's not going to feel like the same as, the 2014 World Series champion or 2017 World Series champion. But I think the same way for these Triple Crown races, Kenny, no, that's not the same, but we're going to be able to put it in context. And we're going to look back at this and be like, wow, Tiz the Law won the Belmont when it kicked off the Triple Crown season, and it wasn't at its normal distance. And that is kind of cool, too. And so all these things, if you just accept that everything is all jacked up and 2020 is different, I think you can kind of appreciate the things that happen along the way. I hope we have a few fans at the Kentucky Derby. I know that is the plan at this moment, and it'll be just as special in 2020 as it is other years.
Ahmed, it's been great to catch up with you. Thanks for your time. I'll let you get back to the Premier League soccer as we're interrupting you in your studio there, and I hope to see you in person soon, pal. Thank you.
Same here, Kenny. Talk to you soon.
Ahmed Fareed, NBC Sports. More on the Horse Racing Show right after this. And welcome back into the Horse Racing Show. Thanks to special guest today, Hall of Fame jockey Chris McCarron from NBC Sports, Ahmed Fareed. Enjoyed those conversations. And, Thomas, you and Ben are sitting there and they're listening to these guys and, some great points are made. I really like Chris McCarron talking about balance. It's important in our life, literally and figuratively.
That's right. Yeah, that's right, Kenny. I mean, it's like anything else. You have to be well-rounded in order to truly be one of the best.
Yeah, well said. And that's what he did, and that's what he's probably doing out there on the golf course right now. He's probably hung up. He's out there on the golf course, and I know he's shooting a lot better than he's claiming he is. Anyway, like Ahmed said, it's nice when the fans get back, hopefully at the Kentucky Derby. Anyway, the road to the Triple Crown continues. We will be back next week. Thank you, Ben Chaffins. Thank you, Thomas Kenny. And thank you all for tuning into this episode number 76 of the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice, and we'll talk again next week.